Welcome back to a brand new video where today we are going to be ranking every single hip hop record from the year 2022. Now, I know what you're saying. Are you insane? And the answer is yes. I mean, you can see the amount of records we are going to be talking about. There is over 150 records which we are going to rank and put into this tier list to see how good last year truly was for hip hop. Now, listen, this is going to be a long video, so grab a snack, grab a drink of water, sit back, relax, hit that subscribe button, and let's get right into it. The first record we are going to be looking at is Denzel Curry's Melt My Eyes, See Your Future. Denzel Curry is a rapper who has built up such a great catalog through serious conceptual records like Imperial and Taboo, but also with these really fun side projects like Unlocked with Kenny Beats and Zeus. So for Denzel to come out here with all of that pressure, with all of that hype, and manage to redefine himself both as a person and as an artist, it was truly amazing to see. Now, the reason why Melt My Eyes works so well is because Denzel is just so vulnerable and honest. He keeps it so real on this record as he finds pieces of himself that he was never able to uncover before. He apologizes for mistakes he made, and he understands what the value of fame is. He understands that he no longer needs validation from outside sources, and this is just all so powerful to hear. Now, between the topical exploration that makes this record so healing and the musical soundscape, which incorporates a jazz feel and it really makes it sound like a modern Soulquarian project, I mean, this record is just purely amazing. And for all those reasons, we're going to be starting off this tier list strong with putting Melt My Eyes all the way up in the S tier. So we got our first S tier album. Let's see how many more will join Denzel. The next record we are going to be looking at is Nas and Hit Boy's King's Disease 3. Sum it up shortly, this record's better than King's Disease 1, it's better than King's Disease 2, and it's better than Magic as Nas and Hit Boy just perfect their formula. Nas's bars sound wiser and sharper than ever, and Hit Boy's soar sounds more opulent. I mean, if there was a record that sounded like fine wine, this project would be it, and there are not many rappers who are at age 50 almost and can make a project this good. So for all those reasons, we're going to be throwing King's Disease 3 right up in the A tier. So we are off to a strong start, and things are going to continue as we look at Little Simz's No Thank You. Now, again, the pressure was high for Little Simz after coming off of such an amazing record like 2021, Sometimes I Might Be Introvert, and she managed to make a really strong follow-up. I mean, what makes this record so special is that Simz shows us her growth, maturity, and development as a person, but within a new light. She's not focusing as much on her own personal development, and she's focusing on herself in the understanding of the industry, understanding her purpose, and understanding how to stay sane in such a crazy world. These are all really powerful sentiments that no matter where you are in life, you can take something valuable from. And this record sounds so beautiful with this really soulful score, which just feels so elegant. It feels like you're inside of a palace and the walls are just echoing in as you listen to this beautiful soundscape. And for all those reasons, we're going to be putting No Thank You all the way up in the A tier. So she will be joining Nas. So we're off to a good start so far. Let's see how this rounds out as we look at Vince Staples' Ramona Park Broke My Heart. Now, this is another really strong record. Vince Staples was coming off of his 2021 self-titled project, and this set the scheme for this record really well. Now, what I think Ramona Park Broke My Heart does so well is its musical world building. Everything feels so connective, everything feels so concise, and everything feels like it's there for a purpose. Vince narrates us through these tales of his childhood and growing up in his neighborhood, and it's all really fun and captivating. I mean, there are so many creative tracks here, such as When Spark Flies, where Vince raps from the perspective of a gun, and there's also really nice, fun bangers like Magic, which is produced by DJ Mustard, and Lemonade, which features Ty Dolla $ign. Now, this is a really fun record, and while I think it could have been a little better if there was a better climax, if there were some meatier songs, and things to really connect the whole project together outside of its atmosphere and feel, I still do really think that Ramona Park Broke My Heart is another example. It is another strong addition to Vince Staples' really underrated discography. So for those reasons, we're going to be putting this record in the B tier. Next up, we are looking at 777 by Lotto, and this record is an album that got a lot of hype, and understandably so. I mean, Lotto is an entertaining artist, and there are some really cool collabs here, like Wheelie with 21 Savage and Sunshine, which teams up Lotto with Lil Wayne and Childish Gambino, and that is a really awesome collab. Now, with that said, I don't think that this is a mind blowing body of work. I think it's generally just a standard mainstream hip hop record, but it is average in terms of the execution of it. So I'm going to be putting 777 in the D tier. The next record we are going to be looking at is Kenny Beats' Louie. And wow, this record really took me by surprise. So to set the stage, Kenny Beats dedicated this record to his father, who is suffering from cancer, and he really put his all into this record. Each beat, each instrumental, it feels like it's so powerful. It feels like there's so much emotion and so much purity embedded into it. Now, this record isn't an entirely instrumental album, as there are features from artists like JPEG Mafia and Slow Thigh, but they never feel like the centerpiece of the track, and they almost feel as if they were just sampled into the beat. The way Kenny curates this entire experience to make it feel like a letter to someone that's so important to his life, it's so beautiful, and it really shows how powerful music can be. So for those reasons, I am going to be putting Louis into the top of B tier. I mean, if you like a record like Jay Dilla's Donuts, you will love Louis by Kenny Beats. The next record we are looking at is 23 by Central C. And yeah, it's music. So that's really all I gotta say. It's alright. I mean, is it the worst piece of music ever? No. But is it just painfully boring and painfully mediocre? Yeah. And that is going to secure it a nice spot in the E tier. Now, the next record we are going to be looking at is Open Mike Eagle's Component System with the Auto Reverse. I know that's a lot for a title, but if you don't know who Open Mike Eagle is, he is one of the most creative minds in the abstract hip hop scene, and he really put together a special project with this one, tying his entire life together in this really emotional and really introspective opus. I mean, we see him rap through so many different perspectives, tying together his younger mind with his older mind, and we really see some of the emotional damage that has affected him over the past few years. Whether it's something like The Thing that I can't mention because YouTube will demonetize his video, or it's something like MF Doom's passing, which really affected him, as that was one of his idols and an artist that he actually worked with. I mean, everything is so well thought out and it's really powerful. So for all those reasons, I am going to be putting Component System with the Auto Reverse in the B tier, in between Ramona Park and Louis. The next record we are looking at is from the one and only Don Cheadle, Freddie Gibbs himself, Soul Sold Separately. Now, this record is one that I have kind of mixed feelings about, in the sense that, yeah, it does contain some of Freddie's best tracks ever, but it also suffers from a lot of issues that could have been fixed very simply. I mean, the random trap songs, which just feel so uninspired and so generic, and just the sequencing, which this opening leg of the record, outside of the first two tracks, it's just so clunky because of those trap songs. This project is really derailed by some poor sequencing issues, but even then, the highs overcome any sort of negativity to make me put it too low on this tier list. So I'm still going to be putting Soul Sold Separately in the B tier, but I think if you fix this record, it could have easily been higher. Now, the next record we are looking at is from somebody who has been beefing with Freddie Gibbs, or Freddie Gibbs really has been beefing with him, Benny the Butcher with Tana Talk 4. Now, similar to Freddie Gibbs, this record was minorly underwhelming to me, in the sense that it was not as good as their past records, and it was not as good as they hyped it up to be. But even then, this was a really enjoyable project with great bars and great beats, as Alchemist and Derringer handled the score and created such a cohesive and coherent soundscape that really embodied where Benny the Butcher's at in his career. It highlighted both the elegant and more opulent side of a record like Burden of Proof, but also kept that same griminess that you would expect from a Tana Talk record. I mean, obviously, outside of all of that, this record is topped off by a career highlight from Benny in Johnny P's Caddy, which features an amazing J. Cole feature. And for all those reasons, we're going to be putting Tana Talk 4 all the way up in the B tier. We're going to be putting it above Soul Sold separately. The next record we are going to be looking at is from the one and the only Robert Glasper with Black Radio 3. Now, Robert Glasper is a producer, multi-instrumentalist, and he is one of the most creative and fun minds in all of the hip-hop, R&B, and jazz space. And this record culminates all of those styles. It features an array of really fun and really strong guest performances from names like Q-Tip, Killer Mike, and even Mac Miller, who delivers a beautiful posthumous performance. And if you enjoy all of those sounds implemented into one record, if you enjoy a fun project which has a great soundscape with a ton of great features, this is a record you should check out, as I'm going to be putting it all the way up in the B tier. Now, the next record we are looking at is Megan Thee Stallion's Traumatized. And I feel like this record honestly went under the radar in terms of its potential mainstream success, but I actually really liked this record from Meg. It had a darker sound, more of a little bit of like a 3-6 Mafia vibe to it. It was a lot more gritty. It was a lot more Memphis inspired, and I really enjoyed that change in style for her. Now, it was a little too bloated, and I mean, at the end of the day, it is a Megan Thee Stallion record. So in terms of the topical scope and the creative liberties, they're only so limited because it is, a huge mainstream artist, but it is still a dope record. I'm actually going to be putting this in the C tier. The next record we are going to be looking at is Quelle Chris's Death Fame. And very similar to Open Mike Eagle, Quelle Chris is one of the most creative minds in abstract hip hop. And between the introspective and heartfelt lyrics and the hollow soundscape, which creates such a bleak feel to the record, this is a really strong body of work that you can gain a lot out of listening from. I mean, this record will hurt you, and it will really push your emotions to the limits at time because the writing is so honest. It is so vulnerable, but at the same time, I mean, records like these are some of the most empowering and some of the most inspiring in terms of what you can do after you have went through a healing process. So for all those reasons, I'm going to be throwing Death Fame in the B tier right after Tana Talk 4. The next record we are going to be looking at is Lupe Fiasco's Drill Music in Zion. And for those who don't know, Lupe Fiasco is about as good as it gets lyrically. I mean, each one of these guys' bars doesn't just have one meaning, doesn't just have two, but a lot of times it can have 3 and even 4 different meanings in just a single phrase, in just a single bar. It is ridiculous. And what makes Drill Music in Zion special compared to the rest of his really profound and really intricate discography is that it is a critique on the modern music industry and hip hop culture as a whole. Obviously, Lupe talks about drill music, how labels promote such a violent subgenre, and the dangers and the problems that it really causes. Whether you agree with Lupe's stance or not, he poses a really powerful argument and a really powerful critique of what is going on. And if you want a record that is going to make you think and have some of the most well thought out and in-depth lyrics that you will ever hear, you will not find anything better in 2022 than Drill Music in Zion. So for those reasons, I am going to be putting this record in the A tier, in between No Thank You and King's Disease 3. Billy Woods is another rapper who is creating some of the most thought-provoking records in the game, and this record is honestly one of his best. It's so dark, it's so grim, and it's so gritty, and Billy Woods delivers one of his best performances here. I mean, he raps about an array of topics, the loss of identity, so many different issues within the world, and the way Billy just makes this picture so bleak and so hopeless by the end of the record, it is one that will, really take a toll on you emotionally. I mean, this record is not an easy listen, but if you're willing to listen to something that is so dark and that is so inaccessible, you will really enjoy this record. And for all those reasons, I'm going to be putting Ethiops up in the A tier right next to Drill Music in Zion. The next record we are going to be looking at is a beautiful heart-touching posthumous album in Phife Dawg's Forever. Now, first off, rest in peace, Phife Dawg. Obviously, one of the members of A Tribe Called Quest, and he is an all-time legend, one of the greatest rappers of all time. Now, Phife passed away in 2016, and this record was put together by DJ Rasta Root, one of Phife Dawg's best friends, a producer himself, and he really put together a beautiful experience that honored Phife's legacy and everything that embodied his spirit. There are so many great tracks here. We were really able to get into Phife's brain here and understand where he was at the time of the recording of these songs. He talks about his relationship with Tribe over the years, how he's grown as a man. There is so many powerful moments here, including the track Dear Dilla, which was Phife's tribute to the legendary J Dilla, and Q-Tip hops on the track. And it just feels like the ultimate salute to two of hip hop's fallen legends. And all in all, this record is really beautiful. And another thing that I think we need to admire about it is the purpose of it. Phife Dawg intended to release this record, and he almost had it complete by the time he passed away. So this record really did come from his mind, and we really were able to receive the experience that he wanted us to hear. So for all of those reasons, for all this record does, I'm going to be putting it up into the B tier in between Black Radio 3 and Soul Sold separately. Long live Phife Dawg. The next record we are going to be looking at is Lil Durk's 7220. And Lil Durk is a rapper that I just don't really get. Now, yeah, here and there, I've liked a song from his. I have liked a feature that he's done. But for an album's worth of material, Lil Durk has always just bored me, as I think he's way too uninspired to captivate an audience for a long period of time. And I think his albums are just way too bloated with filler tracks. And this album just does all of that. So if you like Lil Durk, I'm sorry, don't kill me, but I'm going to be throwing this album in the E tier. But don't worry, it's better than Central C's album. So that's that. The next record we are going to be looking at is another album that was really underwhelming in Cordae's From a Bird's Eye View. Now, Cordae's debut album, Lost Boy, was a really strong welcome to the rap game. He proved that he has the qualities of a star, and not just a star, but a mainstream star, someone very similar to a J. Cole, delivering very relatable and understandable stories and subject matter, but in a way that is somewhat complex and that listeners will hold on to for a long time. So people had high expectations for this record. And with a feature list that had names like Stevie Wonder and Eminem and Freddie Gibbs on it, the expectations were really high, but Cordae just missed. I mean, this record just did not do anything better than its predecessor. Cordae actually regressed in every single way possible. Now, I hope that Cordae can use this record as a turning point, as a learning moment, and I hope he can bounce back, but as this record stands, it's just really plain, it's really boring, and it's really uninspired. So for those reasons, I'm going to be putting From a Bird's Eye View in the E tier. The next record we are going to be looking at was maybe the most anticipated album in hip-hop history, with Mos Def, who is now known by his real name, Yasin Bey, and Talib Kweli's No Fear of Time. I mean, this record is following up a certified classic from 1998. And to make the expectations even higher, Madlib produced the entire thing. So going into this record, people were expecting a masterpiece. And now, while people were mad as it was only available to listen to on Luminary, it is a really solid record. Now, when I first reviewed this record, if you've seen that video, it's almost a year old at this point. I gave the album a 9.4, but the more and more that I've sat with No Fear of Time, it's actually grown off me quite a bit. Now, in terms of just the musical sphere of everything, it sounds really strong. I mean, Mos delivers great lyrical performances, Talib delivers really strong lyrical performances, and Madlib's production, I mean, it's not his best, but it's good enough, but it's just something is missing. I mean, from the 9-song track list, which just feels a little rushed and underdeveloped as the record's not even 40 minutes long, to the overall subject matter, which, while Mos and Talib do play off of each other well, it just doesn't feel like it amounts to something greater narratively. So while this record is fun musically, I no longer hold it in the same regard as I once did. Now, still, it is a really entertaining record, but it's just not an amazing one to me. So I'm going to be putting No Fear of Time in the B tier, but I'm going to be putting it at the top of the B tier as I think it's that fun. But, for people who have seen my previous reviews and thoughts on this, it is a big step down. The next record we are going to be looking at is Quadeca's I Didn't Mean to Haunt You, and wow, this record is amazing. Now, fun fact, I'm actually on the Wikipedia page for my critical review of Quadeca's previous record, From Me to You, which I gave a 6.4, I believe. And, while the record wasn't my favorite, I did really notice and I did make a point that Quadeca's potential was there. And while the potential was there, I did not think that he would reach such a high bar of quality this soon. I mean, this record is just amazing. This record, it's almost indescribable when you really talk about it in terms of everything. Conceptually, it's brilliant, following the perspective of a ghost, the ramifications of loss of life, and the soundscape. It's so ominous, it's so eerie. It's all put together so well. I mean, this is one of these records that I could sit here and talk about for 30 minutes. It really does deserve its own video. So if you want to see that, let me know in the comments below. But for all intensive purposes here, this album is great. It is a masterclass in musical world building, and it is conceptually so rich. And for all those reasons, I'm going to be putting I Didn't Mean to Haunt You in the A tier, in between Aethiopes and No Thank You. The next record we are going to be looking at is Ian Dior's On to Better Things. And I don't know what it is, but I just don't like this guy. I've never liked his music. It's just so bland. It's so boring. It's like that episode of The Office where they talk about the Black Eyed Peas, and it's like it's rap for people who don't like pop music, but it's pop music for people who don't like rap or whatever. You know the saying, but it's like this guy's music is just so directionless and it's so devoid of any creativity that it just stomachs me to listen to this guy. I don't think this record is good. I gave it a couple listens when it dropped and never returned to it. And for just how plain out bad this project is, it's going to make history and it's going to complete the tier list in a way and join the F tier. So now we have a record on every part of the tier list. The next record we are going to be looking at is Stormzy's This Is What I Mean. And wow, I mean, Stormzy really delivered a project that I don't think anybody expected from him. He pulled us in a brand new direction. It was really exciting to hear him craft these more melodically inclined anthems. And while I don't think the execution of this was as good as it could have been, this was a really interesting and exciting and entertaining record. I hope that Stormzy masters this style on his next project, as I think the potential was clearly there, but I just don't think he stuck with it enough to make a truly great experience. But with that said, this is still a solid body of work, and it is going to be topping this C tier. The next record we are going to be looking at is Quavo and Takeoff's Only Built for Infinity Links. And I just want to say, first off, long live Takeoff, a legend who truly changed the rap game. And this record with Quavo and Takeoff, it was a lot of fun. Now, the past couple of Migos records before this, I wasn't really enjoying as much as the original Culture or anything before that. I felt like they lost that fire. The records were too long, the records were too plain, but with just Quavo and Takeoff, they managed to recapture that earlier magic of their projects. I mean, this record was just so fun. It was so entertaining hearing Quavo and Takeoff play off of each other. And it was really a joy to hear Takeoff in this more focused setting where he was really able to shine. Without Offset, we really got to see Takeoff take more of a leading role. And the way his hard-hitting verses, his hard-hitting bars, played off the more lighthearted and melodic style of Quavo. It was all really exciting. I think that this was one of the best trap records, not just of 2022, but honestly of the 2020s as a whole, because I felt that trap has really not been the same since the turn of the decade. So for all those reasons, I'm going to be putting Only Built for Infinity Links in the B tier. The next record we are looking at is Rico Nasty's Las Runas, and Rico Nasty is an artist who I think has so much potential going forward. And while this record is not as cohesive and concise as a project that I think she can make in the future should be, This record was a lot of fun, and it really just unleashed her raw creativity. I mean, from these crazy headbanging anthems to these more introspective songs, which focused on her as a mother and focused on her as a person. There were so many great moments on this project. So while it was not as good as it could have been, this was a solid record. And if you've paid attention, all the solid records have been pretty much going in the same place so far, and they've been going in the C tier. And guess what? Rico's now got the best record in the C tier. And honestly, right now, I mean, you see this tier list, we've had mostly really good and really solid records so far. So let's see if this continues. The next record we are looking at is Future's I Never Liked You. And this was one of the most hyped up records of last year, one of the most popular, one of the most commercially successful. I mean, it was nominated for a Grammy, but in actuality, I'm not a big fan of this record. Honestly, this record just felt like Future checking boxes at this point. He was doing the exact same thing that he has done on almost every single one of his records for the past decade, but there just wasn't as much flair and fire to really make it stand out. Now, I don't have anything against artists, recapturing that same formula, because that does work for some artists when they make it magic enough, and that has worked for Future over and over again, from records like DS2 to High Off Life. But I Never Liked You just had a lot of filler. I think if it was cut down, it could have been solid, because there are some really great moments, but all in all, this record just felt a little too plain and a little too safe to me. So for those reasons, I'm going to be putting this into the D tier. Again, it's not a bad project, but it's just not really that good. The next record we are looking at is 5EO Foreign's Bible. And I think after 5E went out at the Donda listening party and we heard his verse from Off the Grid, I think people were really high on him and were waiting to hear this record. And honestly, I think this record is a little bit underrated in the hip hop space. I don't think we give it enough credit. Now, I'm not going to sit here and call it a masterpiece or anything, because it's not, but you know, take this with a grain of salt. It is the drill version of Donda. I mean, 5EO really evolved as an artist, not just making these one-dimensional drill tracks, but he really fleshed himself out as an artist, showed his ability to rap over an array of different instrumentals, infused the classic drill elements with more soulful tracks and more soulful vibes. I mean, he really did test himself as an artist, and I do think it works. I'm actually going to be putting Bible in the B tier, which I know some people may be mad at, but listen, hey, it is what it is. But let me just say this. I mean, the B tier, which I think these albums are good, there is levels to it. I mean, obviously, again, I'm not going to go and, do a B plus, B minus, but like No Fear of Time is a B plus, and, Bible is a B minus. So let's just be clear about that. And the next record we are going to be looking at is Lil Baby's It's Only Me. And I'm going to be honest, I don't know how this record is like successful. This is the most boring, uninspired, bland, and uninnovative record that I think I've heard in such a long time. I don't know how this record is like doing so well financially and commercially right now, because I have not seen a single person listen to this record since like the day it came out. It just feels like Lil Baby checking boxes, and Lil Baby is an artist, unlike Future, who's not inherently exciting the same way Future is in the first place. So Lil Baby doing the bare minimum, it's not just painfully average, it's painfully bad. I really don't like this record. It has only grown off me more over time, and that's saying something. And for all those reasons, I'm going to be putting this in the F tier, and I actually think it's worse than Ian Dior's record. So congratulations, Ian Dior. You no longer have the worst record on the tier list. The next record we are going to be looking at is Dialeek's Precipice. And if you don't know who Dialeek is, they are a legendary experimental hip hop group. They really pushed the ground in terms of what experimental artists can do in the hip hop scene in the early 2000s and so on. And this new record just, continues to show their creative brilliance. Now, it's not as good as their earlier records, but this is a solid body of work, and one that I'm going to be putting into the C tier. The next record we are looking at is Boldy James and Real Bad Man's Killing Nothing. Now, the reason this record's good is very simple. Boldy James is very good at rapping. I mean, since 2022, all of Boldy's records have pretty much been identical in terms of the subject matter. It's just the flavoring in terms of the soundscape that really makes them different. And Real Bad Man delivers a great score here. There is just some hard hitting, but, really well put together beats here. And it's a dope combination that makes for a dope record. For those reasons, I'm going to be putting this album all the way up in the B tier, not the C tier, the B tier, in between Only Built for Infinity Links and Bible. Now, the next album we are looking at is Ice Cube, Snoop Dogg, E40, and Too Short's mega collab album, Mount Westmore. And I know, a lot of people got hyped about this album, but in actuality, this was like when Hakeem Olajuwon, Scottie Pippen, and Charles Barkley teamed up on the Rockets at the end of their careers. This was really nothing that exciting. I mean, I'm not trying to be disrespectful. All of these artists are legends, let's be clear, but they just don't have that same fire. If, some rappers age and they get worse and some get better, these artists really have all gotten worse and they don't have that same magic that they did back in the 90s. For all those reasons, this is just a really plain and average experience. I'm going to be putting Mount Westmore down in the D tier. The next record we are going to be talking about is Drake and 21 Savage's Her Loss. Now, Drake is an artist that honestly has not hit at the bar of quality that he should have since, if you're reading this, it's too late. So for Drake to finally deliver another quality experience in the way we'd expect him to, this was a lot of fun. Now, 21 Savage really did take a backseat here, but when he did perform, he delivered great verses. It just felt like this was more of a Drake album with 21 features than an actual collab album. But even with that, I mean, Drake just delivered a super fun and a super exciting and a super chaotic performance. And that's just fun. I mean, hearing Drake rap and actually rapping, none of that other, failed experimentation to step out into other lanes. It was just such a joy to hear this cohesive and concise Drake album, which highlighted one of his best skills, this petty and chaotic version of Drake. So, for those reasons, I'm going to be putting Her Loss in the B tier, and I'm going to be putting it all the way in between Tana Talk 4 and Death Fame. The next record we are going to be looking at is Big K.R.I.T's Digital Roses Don't Die. And first off, Big K.R.I.T is one of the most underappreciated rappers in hip hop right now. I mean, this guy is one of the best MCs of the 2010s. He has one of the best albums of the 2010s in Forever is a Mighty Long Time. And this was his first album since 2019. So honestly, I thought that this album was a little bit underhyped, but overall, a lot of people were turned off to this album because somebody as lyrical and as thought-provoking as Big K.R.I.T decided to take a melodic direction in his career, making an R&B album that is focused on love. But even with that, I don't think people gave this album a fair chance because K.R.I.T did a really good job. Now, the execution is not perfect, and K.R.I.T's singing could have used some work here and there, but all in all, he made the transition really strongly, and he delivered a really fun and inspiring experience. I mean, we've talked about albums that are emotionally damaging here, that are very painful to listen to. This album is the opposite. This album is just fun. I mean, if you want to listen to a record and just smile and get good vibes and hear good beats and good vocals and this, overall just beautiful, soulful feel, I mean, this is the record for you. So I think that people overlook this record, and I'm not saying it's a masterpiece or, it's this genre changing album, but it definitely has the potential to be something greater in terms of Big K.R.I.T, making a melodic album, or maybe Big K.R.I.T taking his rapping skills and infusing them with his R&B skills, kind of like a Tyler the Creator. I mean, this really changes the playing field for what Big K.R.I.T can do in the future. And on its own, this record is just a really fun body of work. So for those reasons, I'm going to be putting Digital Roses Don't Die in the B tier. I'm going to be putting it right after Bible. The next record we got is Gunna's DS Forever. And do you remember when this beat Dawn FM for the number one album? That was weird, right? I just wanted to say that. I mean, this record's hype when it came out was like ridiculous. And, it was okay then and it's okay now. I think this is a D tier album. I'm not going to waste a lot of time talking about it. It's just an okay trap album. There's some okay songs, but honestly, like the highlights of this record were some of the most mid parts. I'm not saying like highlights in terms of like the quality. I'm talking about the highlights in terms of the biggest songs like Push and P Power with Drake. I thought those songs were just so mind numbing. And for those reasons, I'm going to be putting DS Forever at the bottom of the D tier. It's not a bad record, but it's not a good one. The next album we are looking at is 2 Chainz' Dope Don't Sell Itself. And 2 Chainz is a rapper who, before this point, always delivered projects on the same level of quality and the last. So when this record was as mediocre as it was, I was just disappointed. Again, very similar to some of the other records I have talked about. This record just felt like a plainer version of projects we have already seen from 2 Chainz. So this was just underwhelming. Again, it's not bad. It's not horrible, but it's just mid. And for that reason, I'm going to be putting this at the top of the E tier. The next record we are looking at is NBA YoungBoy's The Last Slimeito. And yeah, it's music. So it's an album. That's all I got to say. We're going to be putting it down in the F tier. I mean, it's YoungBoy. It's like YoungBoy's like, filler project. It's just lame. It's just lame. I don't know what else to say. The next project we are looking at is Post Malone's 12 Carat Toothache. And I mean, this album just kind of feels like a Post Malone record for dummies. Or, I'm not going to go as far to say it sounds like if a Post Malone album was made by an AI because, Post vocals are still captivating enough, but this record is nowhere near as fun or as enjoyable as any of his previous projects. And, there are a couple of okay tracks. It's okay, but this is not a memorable album. I'm going to be putting this in the D tier. It's just an average body of work. The next album we are looking at is Jack Harlow's Come Home, The Kids Miss You. And this was really disappointing. I had high hopes for this album. Jack Harlow is an MC who was consistently improving up to this point, both as a lyricist, as an artist, and as a hitmaker. So, when a track like Nail Tech was released, I was like, yeah, this is going to be a great project. But once First Class dropped, I knew we were in for something disappointing. And honestly, this whole album is bad outside of Nail Tech and the Drake verse on Churchill Downs. This record was really, really disappointing. And it's not the worst album of the year, but it is going to be joining our friends in the F tier. The next record we are looking at is Pusha T's It's Almost Dry. And this is one of my favorite albums of last year. It is one of the most fun albums of last year. And damn, it's just so exciting. Now, the whole concept of Pusha T getting Kanye and Pharrell to produce an album together, it's just the most Pusha T thing ever. Like, bro has got 2 of the best producers of all time on speed dial, and they came together and made a really captivating soundscape for him. Now, I do think Kanye's beats are a lot better on this record, as I think Pharrell's were just a little too plain, and they all kind of use the same drums, but even then, Pharrell had a song like Neck and Wrist, which teamed up Push with Jay-Z, and Jay delivered such a good verse. I mean, you can't really knock it that much. Now, Kanye's side of the record definitely has more highlights, like Diet Coke, which Push just delivers a masterclass over, Dreaming of the Past, which contains 3 verses from Push, Rock and Roll with Kid Cudi and Kanye for the last time, according to Cudi. And Push just did his thing over that. I mean, there are so many great moments. Overall, I mean, this record is not as good as Daytona, but it was a really strong follow-up and one that keeps Push as one of the best rappers in terms of artists who are aging like wine. So, for all those reasons, I'm going to be putting It's Almost Dry in the A tier. Now, the next record is a project that never officially released, but at the same time, I do own the $200 device that was needed to listen to it. So I'm going to include it here anyway. Kanye West's Donda 2. Now, the first thing I'm going to say, it's kind of pathetic that I'm going to say that Donda 2, as incomplete and as unhinged as it was better than some albums here. So if your album is lower than Donda 2 on this list, I mean, just step your shit up. Now, this record, and I will say this, it had some strong points that could have made for a really special project if Kanye completed it. From a track like Security, which felt like the gradual progression of the Yeezus era, to moments that teamed up names like Travis Scott and Future, there were a lot of bangers on this record. And there was a lot of potential for a project that had the excitement of A Life of Pablo, but, maybe the emotional weight of an 808s, but also with the grit and the bitterness of Yeezus. So, the framework was laid out, but I mean, that was it. The framework was just laid out. It was never completed. But honestly, the raw creativity of Donda 2 makes it a fun record. And I'm going to be putting it in the top of D tier. So, I mean, if you're mad about that, complain to me in the comments. We can talk about it. But I really do think that, some people try to bash this record like it's garbage. And it's really not the case. It was a really, really average, body of work the way we got it. And I really do wish that Kanye finished it, because I think if Kanye focused on making music instead of doing some of the other things he did to close out the year, it would be a lot better for him at this moment. But the next record we are looking at is the album of the year. DJ Khaled's God Did. Oh, wait, I'm reading the wrong script. Excuse me. DJ Khaled's God Did was really bad, for one exception, the self-titled track. And Rick Ross, Jay-Z, and Lil Wayne on a track. That was such a good moment. Can Khaled please release a version of that track without his voice? Because, I mean, for how good that track is, I mean, Khaled is weighing it down, no pun intended. And Khaled just, this record is so bland. I've talked about this in an entire video, but DJ Khaled just makes the most bland and uninspired music. Take a big name, take a sample from an 80s hit, and throw it together and hope you get something special. I mean, it's like throwing crap on the wall and hoping it sticks. And at this point, I think people are very tired of this formula now. God knows how this album got nominated for a Grammy. That makes no sense. And yeah, this album is bad, but it has a really redeemable moment in that Jay-Z song. So just for that, we're going to be putting it at the top of E tier. It just goes to show you how good Hove can be and how valuable he can be to a record. Now, the next project we are looking at is Brockhampton's TM, and this was Brockhampton's final album, but honestly, it was just like a mixtape of loose tracks. It didn't have the cohesion of the rest of their project, did not have the depth of the rest of their projects, but it was really fun just to hear the group together one more time after Kevin Abstract's, true finale to the Brockhampton saga in The Family, which we will talk about later. This record's not perfect. It's very unhinged, it's very loose, but just for, the raw chemistry and the display of companionship we see, it's a fun record and one that I am going to be putting in the C tier. The next record we are going to be talking about is Kid Cudi's Intergalactic, and Cudi hyped this album up to be like this crazy thing going alongside his movie or Netflix series. I didn't watch it. But, he hyped it up to be this great thing. And, as it came closer to fruition, it just kind of ended up being the soundtrack to his Netflix series. Now, with that said, this shows us why we love Kid Cudi. Every aspect of what makes his music so enjoyable is here. The euphoric sound, the beautiful soul-chilling vocals, it's all here, but, again, it just feels very bare bones and very plain, especially after a really strong record in Man of the Moon 3. So, again, this is a solid record, but it's nothing great for Kid Cudi standards, and we are going to be putting it in the C tier for those reasons. The next album we are looking at is Brockhampton, or really Kevin Abstract's finale to the entirety of Brockhampton's career, The Family. Now, this album is a Kevin Abstract solo record that was released under the Brockhampton alias, both to get them out of a deal, but also to show that the group is no more, and the only person left is its leader, who's now sitting and looking back on everything that went wrong, but also everything that went right. In terms of ending out the career of a group, I don't think that there has ever been a record that has given a more satisfying conclusion to the most dissatisfying reality. I mean, between the chemistry issues, between the creative differences, between the drama that Brockhampton's had over the years, they never reached the ceiling that they could have. And, Kevin addresses all of this here, and honestly, he makes arguably his best album as a result of all of that. There are so many gut-wrenching tracks here. He really dives into the grittiness, the nitty-gritty of the group, and you really do learn a lot about what was going on. But despite all of the trouble and all of the chaos, that we should still celebrate and love Brockhampton. Now, if you're trying to move on in life from something, I don't know if there is a record that's themes are more prevalent and more applicable to, growth, letting go of the past, such themes as that. And I think that this is a really valuable record. And the soundscape of this project is amazing. It really, it incorporates a ton of soul samples, J Dilla samples. It's really, really beautiful. And for all those reasons, we're going to be putting the family up in the A tier. And we are going to be putting it all the way in between No Thank You and It's Almost Dry. The next record we got is Baby on Baby 2. I'm really tired of talking about these trap artists who are chasing their spark and just failing to do so. Again, this record is not good. Anything you ever liked about DaBaby, it's here, but it's just way worse and way more uninspired. And for all those reasons, we are actually going to be putting this at the bottom of the F tier. So Lil Baby has now been dethroned by DaBaby for the worst rated album of the year so far. The next album we are looking at is Cam'ron's You Wasn't There. And this was actually a really strong and somewhat mature statement from a rapper who, again, is not in his prime and he's not aging like Nas, but at the same time, he's not aging like, an Ice Cube or Snoop Dogg where that same spark is just not there at all. Cam is just naturally, regressing. And this kind of feels like the progression of that. We see Cam talk about his days in Dipset, his days as a superstar, but we also see him still enjoying life as a man, as an entrepreneur, as a father. And, it's a really interesting body of work. And I think that there is a real place for records from aging veterans that are not Jay-Z and Nas in hip hop. It's nice to hear, where'd Cam'ron go? How is he doing? And I think that, he really excels in that role, showing that, you may not be a superstar anymore. You may not be making the best records and have the most attention, but there still is a reason to create music and use it as an outlet to express other facets and other passions within your life. So this is a really solid record and one that's pretty inspiring, and I'm going to be putting it in the C tier for that reason. The next record we are looking at is Westside Boogie's More Black Superheroes, and after the sensation that was 2019's Everything's for Sale, Westside Boogie followed it up with a record that is arguably better than that, and that is saying a lot. I mean, Westside just improved on every single facet of that record. Whether that's his storytelling, whether that's his singing, everything is improved here. And conceptually, this record is really strong as Westside really dives into some personal topics, including his mental health, including his relationships, and how this all affects his own life. Now, this record was really strong, and for all those reasons, I'm going to be putting this at the top of the B tier. The next record we are going to be looking at is JID's The Forever Story, and if you have ever heard me speak, if you have ever saw any of my content, you should know that I absolutely love this album. I mean, The Forever Story just succeeds on so many levels. It's both an album that honors lyrical hip-hop, but it also honors the excitement and the fun that, a modern mainstream audience looks for today. It creates such a wide appeal, this project, and while that has allowed for its commercial success, it's also allowed for it to be such a great body of work. I feel that The Forever Story, in a way, brings balance to hip-hop in its entirety. It's a record that honors every single thing we love about the genre, both past and present. I mean, you see that reflected in the feature list. I mean, you got everybody from Lil Durk to Lil Wayne to Mos Def featured on this record. I mean, you see the respect JID has for every aspect of hip hop, and he uses all of these artists, all of these sounds, all of these influences to make a record that is both so personal to his own life and is used to express where he's at, where he's went wrong, but where he's went right, and how he's been able to build the life he has. But he's also made a record that relates to so many of the core themes and conflicts that every rap album ever has talked about, but he expresses all of this in such a complex and next level way, really. I mean, JID is standing outside of the box, seeing everything that's ever went on, both in the past, present, and future of hip hop, and he's using it to make this album, which, it's called The Forever Story. It really feels like this will be relevant forever. And this is a really under explanation of it. I have a full breakdown video on The Forever Story, which you can find on this channel. But for all of those reasons and many, many more, I'm going to be putting The Forever Story all the way up in the S tier over Melt My Eyes. The next record we are going to be looking at is The Game's Drillmatic. And I know this album was 30 songs, but it did get a really bad rap when it dropped, both because of the track list, which had a ton of features and was very long, and also because of the just dumb diss track in the Black Slim Shady, which I thought was a pathetic attempt at dissing Eminem. And I mean, we knew Eminem wasn't going to respond to that. He was not going to waste his time in such a pointless beef, which had no reason to even start. But besides the drama, besides all that, when you look at the actual art in this album, I mean, it's a really strong body of work that contains some of the game's most inspired material in over a decade. From the collaborations which team the game up with everybody from, A$AP Rocky and Lil Wayne to Kanye West and Ice-T, this record really honors the entire lineage of hip-hop history. And yeah, it's flawed, yeah, it's a mess, but it's also a really fun record that I think if you cut down to about 8 to 12 songs, maybe 15, it would be even higher up on this tier list. But for all those reasons, I'm going to be putting Drillmatic in the C tier, and I'm going to be putting it at the highest level in the C tier. Now listen, say what you want about the game, but one thing this record shows is that if he really put his mind to it, he can make an album in the B tier, and maybe if we're pushing it under the right production, maybe the A tier. The next record we are looking at is Damo Genesis Intros, Outros, and Interludes. And first of all, I mean, when we look at Odd Future, we talk about Tyler, we talk about Frank, we talk about Earl, but we don't give Damo enough credit. I mean, he has been one of the most consistent MCs of the 2010s. Every time he's dropped, he's delivered quality. And with this record, he's managed to create another really strong body of work, focusing on such themes as his self-growth and self-progression. I think it's a really inspiring listen. Now, it's a really short listen, but overall, between Damo's lyrics and the production, which is done by the legendary Evidence, this is a really valuable album and one that is really underrated and we don't talk about enough. For those reasons, I am going to be putting intros, outros, and interludes in the B tier, in between No Fear of Time and More Black Superheroes. The next record we are looking at is RZA's Bobby Digital and the Pit of Snakes. And RZA really did deliver a nice little experience here. I mean, there are some flawed moments. Sometimes RZA just sounds too old to rap in terms of the way he's writing his bars, and sometimes the beats sound a little too clunky, but this was a fun little listen, and I think that this was an average project. I mean, if you're a fan of Wu-Tang, you will enjoy this. If you're not a fan of Wu-Tang, I mean, you won't really get much out of it, but it was still a solid listen, and one that I'm just going to throw in the D tier. Now, the next record we are looking at is one of the highlights of 2022, Conway the Machine's God Don't Make Mistakes. Now, Conway has always been one of the most exciting and one of the most revered MCs in the underground. Obviously, being a part of the Griselda movement, he has been seen as, one of the big three alongside Westside Gunn and alongside Benny the Butcher. But in my opinion, Conway never had a record that was as good as Westside Gunn's magnum opus or Benny's magnum opus, but this record really changed the playing field, and that's because of the approach that Conway brought to it. Conway tested himself as a man and as an artist in every sense of the word on this LP. This record is so personal and it's so emotional, and we've never seen that from Conway or any of the Griselda artists. He does not hold back here. He really pulls out his darkest demons. He pulls out his skeletons out of the closet, and he creates such a powerful experience, one that feels like the proper payoff to every body of work that we've heard to this point. Conway has worn his trauma on his sleeve. He's rapped about it to, make him appear as a stronger person who's better than everybody, but he lets that facade go here, and we learn about who the man is beyond the performer and the entertainer and the MC. And that is something that is so valuable. And this record is really one of the most beautiful projects that I have heard in a long time. So for those reasons, I'm going to be putting God Don't Make Mistakes in the A tier. And I'm going to be putting it in between King's Disease 3 and Drill Music in Zion. So if you've seen like my album of the year rankings and stuff, this record has grown on me even more. The next record we are looking at is from Mike Dimes, In Dimes We Trust. If you don't know Mike Dimes, he is a really entertaining rapper out of Texas. He's just delivering really fun bars, really fun lyrical entertainment with a nice flair that makes his music exciting. And this project really maps out what makes him special and what could make him a superstar going forward. Now, for those reasons, I'm going to be putting this record in the C tier. I'm going to be putting it in between Dialec's record and Kid Cudi's Intergalactic. If you want to find a new artist, a new sound in hip hop, and one that could potentially take over in years to come, check out In Dimes We Trust. The next record we are looking at is Wiz Khalifa's Multiverse, and somehow this is not the worst piece of media with the name Multiverse in it from 2022. Yeah, that's a diss at Marvel for those who are in the loop. But yeah, this record is not good. It's just uninspired music from Wiz. I mean, there was a couple of decent tracks, but overall, this album is the epitome of just forgettable music. I'm going to be putting this at the end of the E tier. The next record we are looking at is Black Thought and Danger Mouse's Cheat Codes. And wow, I mean, this was a really special project. From Black Thought's lyrical performance, which is a masterclass in how to make bars that are both, lyrically understandable and digestible, but also really powerful and passionate. And Danger Mouse's production is just so good. Maybe the best soundscape of 2022. It's both really muddy and really gritty, but it also has this pristine quality to it that just makes it feel so special. Between the performance and the chemistry of these two and the features they brought in, which, I mean, this had one of the best feature lists of any record in 2022. There was features from A$AP Rocky, Run the Jewels, Joey Badass. The list goes on. This was such a one-of-a-kind experience. I really love this record, and for those reasons, I'm going to be putting it in the S tier in between The Forever Story and Melt My Eyes. Next up, we got Metro Boomin's Heroes and Villains, and after almost 5 years of waiting, Metro gave us an experience that's arguably better than Not All Heroes Wear Capes. Now, what Metro did on this record was very similar to his predecessor as he assembles an all-star roster of artists and creates this grand, this cinematic, and this otherworldly experience. Now, the main difference between those two records is that Not All Heroes Wear Capes has more of a spacey feel, while this one has more of a sinister and intense feel. And I think that really sets the two apart, and it makes this record very special. I mean, from Future, Travis Scott, 21 Savage, The Weeknd, Young Thug, there are so many amazing performances, and Metro's musical mind just creates the most cohesive and coherent version of what a star-studded experience can be in today's musical landscape. I mean, in an industry where you got guys like DJ Khaled trying to do the same thing, to have an actual producer who understands how to curate, who understands how to sequence, and who understands how to create musical worlds, it is so refreshing. And for all of those reasons, I am going to be putting Heroes and Villains in the B tier. And this is another record that has grown on me since it has released. And I'm going to be putting it in between Death Fame and Ramona Park Broke My Heart. Next record we are looking at is Lil Uzi's Red and White, and with this being the first Uzi record since Eternal Atake and Love vs. the World 2, but everybody was pretty hyped to hear this, and I mean, this is a 9-song EP, so it actually does offer a lot in terms of length, but the 28 minutes of material in this project, I mean, it's just alright. There are some cool attempts at trying something new. Uzi's definitely taking more of an influence to a sound like Whole Lotta Red. Now, it's not a carbon copy, but Uzi is definitely focusing on a more rage-centric sound, on a more intense sound on this record. And I mean, it's just an average experience. It's grown on me a little since it came out, but I am not going to be putting it any higher than the D tier. The next record we are looking at is Lord Sko's Museum. And if you have not heard of Lord Sko, well, guess what? I am about to put you on. Now, listen, if you want an artist, a young artist who respects the lineage of where he's from in terms of New York hip hop, somebody who respects everybody from Jay-Z, Nas, and Biggie to ASAP Rocky and Griselda, this is the kid for you. Museum is an experience that, you know, rebirths New York hip hop by giving it a fresh new sound, but also honoring its roots. I mean, Sko's bars are so tenacious, they're so well written, but the score is so opulent and pristine. In a lot of ways, if you enjoy West Side Gun records, but want a little more pizzazz in terms of the penmanship, I think this is a perfect record for you. And honestly, like, this is one of the best records of 2022. Definitely check this project out if you have not. And for all of the reasons I have said and many more, I am going to be putting Museum in the B tier, only in between intros, outros, and interludes, and more black superheroes. So as you can see, Lord Sko is him, and definitely check that record out. The next record we are looking at is Ken Carson's X, and oh my god, this record was a pain to listen to. It was so long. There was no reason for it to be that long. The sound was annoying. It was uninnovative. It didn't take any leaps forward from Teen X. It was just a worse version of that record in every way. I'm going to be throwing this project in the E tier, but it is still better than anything that Durk can make. The next record we are looking at is West Side Gun's Peace, Fly God. And man, this was a really nice listen from West Side Gun. I mean, as always, the Griselda leader always delivers some fine sounding, beautiful, gritty and grimy gangster rap, and this record does that, and it adds a lot of fun to the mix with performances from names like Stove God Cooks. The beats on this record really nail it out of the park with production credits from the likes of Madlib and Conductor Williams, and all in all, this was a really nice experience from West Side Gun. With this not even being his main project of the year, it says a lot about the work ethic and creative spirit of West Side Gun. And we're going to be throwing this record in the B tier, in between Black Radio 3 and Forever. The next record we are looking at is Logic's Vinyl Days, and this is another project that is a love letter to hip-hop, as Logic really creates a project that I think he always wanted to deliver across the years of his career. Logic is just so creatively free here, and it is such a joy to listen to, from collaborations with everybody like current rappers including Action Bronson to legends like The Game, to these really well detailed instrumental canvases which embody the best of the boom bap era but add a modern spin to it. Vinyl Days is just such a fun record, and if you love hip hop, you should love this record. I really do not see how you wouldn't. I mean, the skits get a little annoying, but at the same time, it is absolutely hilarious that Earl Sweatshirt, Anthony Fantano, Dwight from The Office, and Morgan Freeman have skits within the same musical parameters. So for all those reasons, we're going to be throwing Vinyl Days in the A tier. Now, the next record we are going to be looking at is Drake's Honestly Nevermind. And I gave this album a 0.5 when it came out. Now listen, Jimmy Cooks has grown on me, so a little bit similar to God Did, you have one really good song which will definitely bail you out of trouble, but I still don't think that this record is good. I think it's really bad, it's really uninspired, and I really hate the narrative that, a lot of Drake defenders will say. They'll say, oh, well, you don't like experimental music. Oh, it's not for you. Oh, you're a hip hop fan, so you can't enjoy it. No, listen, if it was a good experiment into another genre, I'd like it. I mean, look what Lil Yachty did with Let's Start Here. I've been praising that record, and there are other albums on this list like Big Crit's Digital Roses Don't Die that take an artist in a completely new direction, and I've praised that. So that is clearly not the problem. The problem is that it is a botched attempt at expanding your sound. It's a very Drake attempt at expanding your sound. Listen, it's not the worst record of the year, but we are going to be putting it into the F tier, joining our friends NBA YoungBoy, Ian Dior, Lil Baby, DaBaby, and Jack Harlow. I mean, that's quite a team. The next record we are looking at is I Don't Know's Simple, and this was a really creative and a really enjoyable project from an artist who I think has so much potential still. Uh, Diving into a more electronic sound with production from K.R.I.T, I Don't Know was really able to push his career into a new direction. And with this just being a 8-song tease of what could come in the future, I mean, I'm really intrigued, but it isn't enough material for me to really praise IDK because I don't feel like this sonic attempt to change his sound and style, I don't think that it's fully there. I don't think he's fully mastered it. But like many of the records we've talked about, this is a really strong step into something that could be really successful in the future for him. So I'm going to be putting this record in the C tier. I'm going to be putting it high in the C tier because I really did enjoy this record, and I hope we see more of this sound and he just see an evolved version of it from IDK in the future. The next record we are looking at is Pierre Bourne's Good Movie, and this was a solid record from one of the most innovative producers of our time. I mean, this record isn't as exciting or isn't as interesting as Life of Pierre 4 or Life of Pierre 5, but again, Pierre Bourne gives us a masterclass in musical world building with seamless song transitions, a very cohesive and coherent vibe, and this is a good listen. I don't think this is a breathtaking experience, but it is a very solid and enjoyable project and one that I am going to be putting into the C tier. Next up, we got Ransom's No Rest for the Wicked, and this is one of the illest projects that dropped in 2022. I mean, Ransom really has a special vibe. I mean, he's got that grittiness to him that a Griselda artist would have, but he also has the maturity and complexity of, almost a Larry June in the sense that he's very wise and a lot of his bars contain vast amounts of knowledge, and there's just little tidbits in there that you can apply to your everyday life to make you a little bit better. I think this project is the pinnacle of that growth, and with amazing soulful production from the likes of a Nicholas Craven and many talented others, this project sounds just as beautiful as Ransom's subject matter and overall performances. So for all of these reasons, I'm going to be putting No Rest for the Wicked at the highest point in the B tier, just on the border of the A tier. Next up, we got Redveil's sophomore album, Learn to Swim, and wow. Now, Redveil definitely had potential from the very first time that we heard him, but after this project, Redveil has proved that he can be a full-on superstar, and he is already starting to fulfill that prophecy. This record is so honest and it's so vulnerable, but it's also so dynamic in its sound, with Redveil producing the entire thing. Everything feels so personal and everything feels so intimate, and that's a testament to both Redveil's personal writing and also the production, which he's able to knit to his own desire. This record was a joy to listen to, and one that I'm going to be putting into the A tier in between It's Almost Dry and Vinyl Days. Shout out Redveil. He is a future GOAT. Next up, we have a collab album between Pink Sifu and Real Bad Man with Real Bad Flights. Now listen, these are two professionals within the underground scene. Real Bad Man will always deliver you quality instrumentals, and Pink Sifu will always deliver you quality performances. And these two coming together, it is a match made in heaven. Both understand their skill sets so well. Both create a really unique vibe with Pink Sifu's nasally voice and Real Bad Man, which delivers a really well-fitted score. And overall, between their performances and features from Arm & Hammer and Boley James, this is a really fun record, and one that I'm going to be throwing up into the B tier right below Heroes and Villains. The next record we are looking at is Snoop Dogg's Back on Death Row. And just from the premise of this project, I thought that it was actually super interesting because now owning the label that he was once a part of, and I mean, we know Death Row was a dream team, I thought that we could get a really interesting and even thought-provoking statement from Snoop Dogg. And while this record did try to, rejuvenate interest in Snoop Dogg's career musically, it just created some alright songs with some interesting guest performances. But overall, this was nothing really memorable. We're going to be throwing it in the E tier, although it is the best album in the E tier, so I mean, that's something. Next up, we have Dreamville's D-Day, which teamed up the amazing Dreamville roster with the one and only DJ Drama. I mean, this record just continued what Revenge of the Dreamers 3 did so well. We get a ton of memorable and fun performances from Dreamville members, including Stick with JID, J. Cole, Kenny Mason, and Sheck West, and that track was just chaos. And hearing DJ Drama narrate add to the collaborative spirit. It just adds to the atmosphere and makes the experience even more fun. So for all those reasons, we are going to be putting DJ in the C tier. Next up, we got I Know Nigo, and this record was really hyped up because of the track list, which included features from Tyler, the Creator, A$AP Rocky, Pusha T, Lil Uzi. It was a really star-studded experience, but in actuality, I mean, the record was just alright. Yeah, it was exciting, it was fun, but outside of a few memorable highlights like the A$AP Rocky and Tyler, the Creator track, Come On Let's Go by Tyler, the Creator, Hear Me Clearly, which ended up being on It's Almost Dry too. I mean, as a cohesive experience and as a compilation record, it felt very disjointed with, a good amount of filler tracks. But I mean, just because of the star power, just because of what this record offers in its highs, we are going to be putting it into the D tier as it is a solid experience. Next up, we have Kendrick Lamar's Mr. Morale and the Big Steppers. And after a long period of waiting, Kendrick Lamar finally came back to the rap game and gave us a genre-changing, genre-defining record that completely changed our perception of Kendrick Lamar. Now, Kendrick Lamar is a rapper who has always been looked at as a savior of some sort. And what makes Mr. Morale special is that Kendrick completely breaks down that ideology. He shows us that he is a flawed man with many problems, and he shows us that Kendrick can't save anybody else because his own life isn't even in check. So this is a really powerful sentiment, and by Kendrick breaking down this complex, he shows that no matter what you think about somebody, no matter how high of a pedestal you put them on, they are flawed people. And this is a really powerful sentiment, and this record is really inspiring. Again, you have a project that promotes self-growth, introspection, and also accepting your flaws. Nobody is perfect in this world, and we should not pretend to be. Now, I have a 30-minute video breaking this record down if you want to hear a further analysis and my further thoughts, because that is really an oversimplification of it all. But with all that said, Mr. Morale is going to be going up into the S tier in between Cheat Codes and The Forever Story. Next up, we have another really underrated record with Don't Miss's Lucy's. Now, again, if you haven't heard of Don't Miss, I just put you on. This is a really amazing rapper-producer duo with rapper Art Davis and producer Nasty Beats, and these two just make hell of an experience with their one-of-a-kind chemistry and musical creativity, which, again, honors the entire lineage of hip-hop to create something new, something that's so relatable but also so personal. This experience is a lot of fun, and if you love anybody from MF Doom and A Tribe Called Quest to Kendrick Lamar, you will find enjoyment in this experience. And for those reasons, we're going to be putting Lucy's in the B tier. We're going to be putting it all the way in between Peace Fly God and Black Radio 3. Next up, we got Currency and the Alchemist's Continuance, and this album is just more great music from a legendary duo. I mean, you got the Alchemist's silky smooth beats, and you got Currency's one-of-a-kind, super relaxed, but super potent and technically proficient bars, and it just makes a great combo. We're going to be throwing this record into the B tier all the way after Heroes and Villains and in between Real Bad Flight. Next up, we got your old Droog's Yod Wave. And your old Droog released a lot of projects in 2022, as we will see very quickly, but this was definitely the best record with an array of beautiful beats and memorable performances, and even some nice features from guests like Mach-Hommy. I mean, this was a really dope record, and we are going to be throwing this one into the B tier in between Bible and Digital Roses Don't Die. The next record we are looking at is Snot's Ethereal, and I don't know why this record is as hated as it is, because it's really not that bad. It's not great, but it's not that bad. It contains an array of tracks that are really energetic and fun, but ones that also show us a new side of Snot, a more introspective side. And while he does get carried on certain tracks by features including ASAP Rocky and Joey Badass, this is still a pretty enjoyable experience that if you like a lot of hip hop, you will probably find enjoyment in. I'm going to be putting this record into the D tier, but I'm actually going to be putting it at the very top, which may be a little bit of a hot take. Next up, we are looking at Saba's Few Good Things, and while this record was not as good as the classic album of 2018's Care For Me, this was a really enjoyable body of work that, despite its creative flaws, I do commend for its risk-taking. I mean, melodic Saba was something that I did not think we would see, but he embraced it pretty well. I think, sonically, this project has a really cohesive atmosphere, and I think that it's a really nice one in terms of the grand scheme of the record. But when you look at Saba's singing, it just does not work for me, and I feel that Saba's melodic style really compromised his writing, and Saba's writing is the best part of his entire arsenal. Now, there still are some highlights like 2012, but overall, this record was a little bit underwhelming. But I do think that Saba will bounce back easily from this, as this was a very creative attempt, but it just did not work out the best. So I'm going to be putting this record into the C tier. I'm going to be putting it in between Intergalactic and Cocodrilo Turbo. Next up, we got your old Droogs, Yanni Dangerfield, and while some people may enjoy this project, I feel like this year we really did experience your old Droog fatigue, as he just released too many records, and while this is solid, it's really nothing special in his catalog, so I'm going to be putting this record into the D tier. It's average. If you're a Dump God fan, you'll enjoy it, but there's no real reason to go out of your way to listen to it. Next up, we got Loyal Carner's Hugo, and this was a really powerful record about family, about lineage, and about how trauma and upbringing can affect oneself. This is a really powerful record with a beautiful and opulent score, and it is one that there is a lot to dig into. For all those reasons, I'm going to be putting this record into the A tier, in between It's Almost Dry and Learn to Swim. Next up, we got another Your Old Drew record with Yod Stewart, and pretty much everything I said with Yanni Dangerfield, you can apply to this. I just think it's a little bit worse, and I'm going to be putting it near the end of the D tier. When it comes to underground hip-hop legends, there are not many MCs more revered as Ka, and with the two records he put out this year, Languish Arts and Woeful Studies, he gave us two very special bodies of work that really complemented each other well. Now, he delivers a lyrical masterclass with a ton of really deep and profound subject matter, but I do think musically this project is just a little too gray and a little too gloomy to really captivate me as compared to a previous record like Honors Killed the Samurai or even A Martyr's Reward. So for those reasons, I'm going to be putting both of these albums in the B tier, but I definitely think, like, narratively, these records are an A tier record or maybe even an S. Next up, we got Bun B and Static Selecta's Trill Static 2, and this is another collaboration between legendary UGK MC Bun B and production mastermind, production legend Static Selecta, and they just do what they do best here, kicking dope rhymes over some really nice and jazzy and soulful boom bap beats. There's a ton of cool features on this record. They have really good chemistry, these two, and overall it is a really memorable experience and one that I am going to be putting within the C tier. Next up, we got Coast Contra's Apartment 505, and this was a record that I thought was really creative, and I really enjoyed the dynamics between this group and the amount of sonic liberties that they took over the course of this record. This was a really enjoyable record, and if you like old school hip-hop or modern hip-hop, I think that you will find some level of enjoyment in this project, and for all those reasons, I'm going to be putting this record in the C tier. I'm going to be putting it all the way in between You Wasn't There and TM. Next up, we got Mike's Beware of the Monkey, and Mike is one of the best gifts that the abstract hip-hop world has seen in quite some time, and this record just continues his streak of great projects. I mean, from the soundscape to his one-of-a-kind lyrical style. And if you enjoy this style, you will have a lot of fun with this record. And for those reasons, we're going to be putting Beware of the Monkey in the B tier. Next up, we have Ninth Wonder Zion 6. And I don't think that this project is as good as some of the past Zion installments, but it is still alright. I mean, if you enjoy Ninth Wonder beats, you'll have a lot of fun with this one, but it is nothing too crazy. Again, a solid record, but nothing really memorable. I'm going to be putting this all the way at the end of the C tier. Next up, we have Boldy James's final release of 2022 with Be That As It May. And I don't know if I was really just feeling Boldy James fatigue at this time, or if this record was generally just the most uninspired and low effort material he released in his entire 2020s run. But this record really just did not click with me. The production felt very stale. And again, as I said earlier, Boldy James records in the 2022 and really for the entirety of the 2020s, a lot of them only get as interesting as what the producer puts behind them, as his lyrical performances generally remain the same unless we're looking at a record like, Major on McNichols. So for that reason, I'm just going to be putting this record into the D tier. Again, it's average. If you like Boldy, you will enjoy it, but it's nothing truly remarkable. The next record we are looking at is The Alchemist and Rock Marciano's collab record, The Elephant Man's Bones. And wow, I mean, finally getting this record from two absolute titans in the music industry, two artists who changed how rappers and producers can work, how they can release music in this digital streaming age. It was great to see them come together and deliver a project that lived up to the hype and some. I mean, Rock's one-of-a-kind lyrical style, his smooth flow, it works so well over the buttery loops of The Alchemist, and this really is a special record, one that I'm going to be putting into the A tier. Next up, we have Currency's Drive-In Theater Part 2, and this is just a dope collection of Currency tracks, and one that I'm going to be throwing up into the C tier. Now, we have more your old Droog records with The Shining, and I mean, this record again, I'm saying the exact same thing that I did last time. It's just not as good as Yodney Dangerfield, but it's not as bad as Yod Stewart. But the other record, The Yodfather, I think is a tad bit better than both, and I'd be putting it into the bottom of C tier. But again, everything I said about one of these Droog records can be said about the other, so that's all I gotta say. Now, the next record we are looking at is another one of the most underrated records of 2022. Ab-Soul's Herbert. I mean, waiting since 2016 for a record, I feel like a lot of people kind of forgot about Ab-Soul, and I feel like that kind of hurt the record's hype, but this is an amazing body of work that delivers on every single worry and doubt we may have had after Ab-Soul took such a long break in between projects. I mean, lyrically, Soul is as sharp as ever, and topically, he dives into so much as he also pushes himself as a rapper to try out a bunch of different instrumental styles, to try out a bunch of different flows. This is a really personal and a really powerful body of work. If you haven't seen like a common theme, a lot of these records are just more personal than ever, and when they really get the rawness factor right, you get a special product on your hands. And for those reasons, we're going to be putting Herbert all the way up into the A tier. Next up, we have another record from a legendary artist, a modern legend, Earl Sweatshirt with Sick. And after a long run of really personal but really heartbreaking albums, we finally get to see the resolution, the payoff to records like Doris, I Don't Go Outside, and some rap songs. And it's really a treat, this record. Now, again, Sick is not as deep and it's not as gut-wrenching as Earl's past records, but it doesn't have to be. And it's just fun to finally hear this man at peace and to hear him try out some different styles, to rap over some different beats. It's a really fun experience, and one that if you're a fan of underground hip-hop, abstract hip-hop, Odd Future, or Earl Sweatshirt, you must check out. For those reasons, we're going to be putting Sick into the B tier, in between Death Fame and Her Laws. Next up, we got A Boogie with the hoodies, me versus myself, and I really think that A Boogie is just, it's not his era anymore. I mean, let's just be clear. A Boogie just never really innovated past the late 2010s. He kind of got stuck in that melodic New York wave, and he was never able to distinguish himself from that era of sound. So now it just feels like he's trying to chase something that doesn't exist. And with this project's bloated track list and just generally uninspired subject matter and instrumental choice, it's just a lame record and one that I am going to be putting at the bottom of the E tier. Next up, we have Babyface Ray's Mob. And Babyface Ray is probably my favorite artist who I listened to for the first time in 2022. I mean, he is just such a fun vibe with these hard hitting bars, fast paced beats, and this overall gangster rap trap feel. And Mob definitely wasn't his best record, which we are about to talk about, the record that's better. This was a fun project from him and one that I'm going to be throwing into the C tier. Now, Babyface Ray's best project is definitely Face. And wow, I mean, this was one of my favorite trap records of 2022. It's just so exciting. It's so inspired. And Babyface is really on a mission here just to spit some crazy bars, use his fast paced flow, rap over these intense beats. And there's also a ton of really fun features on this record, from Lucky to Lil Yachty to Pusha T, G Herbo. There is just so much to appreciate on this record. And for all these reasons, I'm going to be putting Face all the way up into the B tier, right in between Lucy's and Peace Fly God. The next record we will be looking at is G Herbo's Survivor's Remorse, and through this double album's worth 25 song experience, G Herbo is able to embody everything that makes him special, from the harder, intense side of his persona to the more conscious anthems. Everything that is loved about G Herbo is embodied here, and with a track list which features everybody from Young Thug and Kodak Black to Conway the Machine and Benny the Butcher, this record really does manage to honor everything that a G Herbo fan can want from that artist. Now, for all those reasons, we're going to be putting Survivor's Remorse right in the C tier. And I also want to make a correction. I put Few Good Things a little too low. I want to advance it up the C tier all the way right after Drive-In Theater. The next record we are looking at is Chain Noir's The Last Remnants, and Chain Noir is a really special MC. She's got a sharp pen, but she also has this conscious edge to her, which makes her music really special. And between her own performance and features from names like Benny the Butcher, this was a really fun record and one that I am going to be throwing up into the C tier. The next record we are looking at is Chain Noir's Food for Thought, and everything I just said about The Last Remnants, apply that to this record. It just has a more concise and cohesive narrative, and it has more thought-provoking topical points. And for those reasons, we're going to be putting this up into the B tier pretty high, as we put it in between Component System with the Auto Reverse and Ramona Park Broke My Heart. Next up is Westside Gunn's 10. And I mean, this record was a special moment when the features from A$AP Rocky, Black Star, Run the Jewels, and many more. This was one of the most star-studded projects in Westside Gunn's catalog yet, and this was just a lot of fun. There was a lot of really cool collaborations, and it just continues to prove and to show the greatness of the Griselda movement. Now, I don't think it was as good as Side B of HWH8, I can't say the full name, but this was still a really enjoyable experience, and one that I am going to be putting in the B tier, in between Beware of the Monkey and Forever. Next up, we have Life in Hell from Lancey Fox, and I don't know if I'm an old head, but I just really don't like this guy. I mean, he's been in the game for a little bit right now, but the sound is just too ambitious with not enough refinement for me to really appreciate it. So I'm going to be just throwing this project in the E tier. I mean, it's not horrible, but it's not good. The next record we are looking at is another really popular record from a new artist in Destroy Lonely's No Stylist. Now, I think out of all of the Playboi Carti proteges, I think that this is my favorite project to spawn from that entire wave of artists, but still, I don't think this project is that remarkable. I mean, there are some creative moments, some creative sparks, but the sound is just way too energetic without any sort of containment to me. Again, call me an old head, I guess. I mean, if that's what you think, cool, but this is just not for me. I'm going to be putting this record in the E tier. Now, again, we are looking at another Playboi Carti protege in Homicide Gang, and everything I just said about Destroy Lonely you can pretty much apply, but just it's worse. It's just not as good, in my opinion, but I don't think this record is as bad as X, so hey, that's something. The next record we are looking at is Roddy Ricch's Feed the Streets 3, and now this was supposed to be the big comeback effort from Roddy Ricch after the critically panned Live Life Fast, and I mean, yeah, it was a comeback. I mean, it was better than Live Life Fast, but really it just went from making a bad record to making a mediocre one. I just don't think that that same excitement with Roddy Ricch is there anymore. His vocals aren't as rich sounding to me, and the production and just the overall cohesion and the experiences he's putting together, it just something feels off. You don't really know what it is, but that same magic just feels gone. I hope Roddy can get it back, but until then, I don't know if he can make a record that goes higher than the D tier. Next up, we got SoFaygo's Pink Hearts, and this record just felt so drained and devoid of any creativity. It was honestly a little sad to hear after all of the hype that was going around SoFaygo's name, and after all of the potential that a lot of people thought he once had. I mean, again, this record just felt way too raw, and it just felt way too lifeless to me. And honestly, SoFaygo to me now at this point, after the failure of this record, I'm really not interested, nor do I think that he can do anything overly special in this rap scene. So, for all those reasons, I am going to be putting Pink Heart in the E tier at the very end. Next up, we got Babytron's Bin Reaper 3. And now I panned the New Testament of the Bin Reaper 3, but I do think that the Old Testament is a lot better. It has a shorter track list, it has better moments, and it really does just highlight what makes Babytron Babytron. I'm not going to say it makes Babytron special or great because I still don't know if I love Babytron or if I think he's a meme, but whatever he's doing, I mean, it's somewhat special, and I'm going to put this in the C tier at the very end for that reason. Next up, we got Duke Deuce's Memphis Massacre 3, and this is a record that was a lot of fun. This record is dark, it's gritty, it's exciting, and again, it picks up in that lineage of the Memphis sound, of the 3-6 Mafia style, of that horrorcore feel. It is just such a refreshing record from the trap space at this point, and it was one of my favorites from last year. So for those reasons, I'm going to be putting Memphis Massacre 3 all the way up in the B tier, in between Bible and Course of the Inevitable 2. Next up, we got Kodak Black's Back for Everything, and I swear I don't hate mainstream trap artists, but they just haven't been making good music, and I mean, this record was just long, and it was nothing. It just felt so plain, so unenergetic, and I'm going to be putting it into the E tier, as this was just a lame listen for me. Next up, we have Baby Keem's Melodic Blue Deluxe. I know there's probably somebody who already commented this album came out in 2021. Yes, we're aware, but I'm looking at the deluxe collection of tracks he released, and this was a really, really nice way to celebrate the success of the era that was the Melodic Blue with a really nice collection of tracks. I mean, just in 7 songs and 17 minutes, Baby Keem fulfills our void for new music from him with tracks like Kill Streaks, which features Don Toliver and Pink Panthers, and Highway 95, which obviously contains that beautiful sample from Lauryn Hill's Killing Me Softly. This was a really nice deluxe, and this is how you should do a deluxe for any artist out there wondering, and for those reasons, we are going to be putting this collection of tracks very high up in the C tier. Next up, we got Smino's Love for Rent, and while I love the vibes and the atmosphere of this album, it was a little bit disappointing to me. I just don't think this record showed any real progression or improvement from Black Swan or from Smino's past records, and I don't know, it just was a little disappointing to me. I really hoped after the amount of time we waited that there was just a little more on this record. But with that said, this is a really fun body of work, a really nice atmospheric experience, and one that'll just make you feel good and have a lot of fun. So for that reason, we're going to be putting Love for Rent at the top of the C tier. The next record we are looking at is Jeezy and DJ Drama's Snowfall, and this record was a really enjoyable listen. I mean, hearing this legendary duo team up after so many years apart and still be able to put together a really fiery and a really exciting experience, it was a really awesome treat, and we're going to be throwing this project up into the C tier. Next up, we have Armani Caesar's The Liz 2, and if you like Griselda, you will enjoy this project. It pretty much follows the same Griselda formula, but there is a little more singing infused, which makes the song structures a little more interesting, and there is even a Kodak Black feature, which to hear Kodak on a Griselda record, that was a really dope sight to see. We're going to be putting The Liz 2 near the top of the C tier. Next up, we have T Grizzly's Chapters of the Trenches, and T Grizzly is always a rapper who has been exciting in certain moments. I mean, his 2018 record Activated, that album was really good to me, but he has never been able to truly captivate me and put me into one of his experiences entirely after that. But this record really changed that. This album was really good, and that's because of the approach that T Grizzly brought to it. This record is sequenced almost like a stage play. T Grizzly narrates us through different scenes of his life, and he does not hold back when fleshing out these tales. I mean, tracks have multiple parts, stories have multiple narratives that connect to other stories within the record. It's a really well thought out project, and this storytelling is put together with T Grizzly's hard hitting drill sound. And I think that this is a really cool record. One that if you like trap music, but you also want something a little more thoughtful, something a little more cohesive to go with it, you will really find a lot of enjoyment in this record. We're going to be putting Chapters of the Trenches in the B tier for those reasons. Next up, we got Mavi's Laughing So Hard It Hurts, and this is a record that has grown on me every single time I've listened to it since it dropped. Now, Mavi really switched it up here compared to his 2019 debut album, Let the Sun Talk. He went in a more melodic direction, and it did work. If you compare it to something like Saba, who are two artists who kind of sold us on their lyrical ability, I think Mavi made the transition a lot smoother, as this album just has better vibes. I mean, this album is a very soothing listen in terms of the musical atmosphere, but Mavi's lyrics are still thoughtful enough where it feels like a natural progression, a natural evolvement of what we heard on his previous record. So this is a really enjoyable album, and while the writing is not as meaty as it was on Let the Sun Talk, he makes up for it with the beautiful, vibrant, and melodic sound. So we're going to be putting Laughing So Hard It Hurts all the way up in the B tier, and we are going to be putting it pretty high up. Next up, we have NBA YoungBoy's 3800 Degrees, and this record wasn't good. It's going to be going into the F tier. We have NBA YoungBoy's Colors, and this was another record that wasn't good. It's going to be going into the F tier, but I don't think it was as bad. And then we have NBA's Ma, I Got a Family, which was hosted by the legendary DJ Drama, and this record was actually a little bit better. YoungBoy expressed some sort of care, some sort of creativity for YoungBoy standards, but this record, again, it's still not good. I mean, I just don't know what you want me to say, so I'm going to be putting this record into the E tier, but hey, I mean, that's YoungBoy's best record of the year, so, I mean, that's something. Next up, we got YG's I Got Issues, and wow, I mean, YG had such a hard fall from grace. This record is really bad. It's really uninspired. It's just really boring. It's really cringy, too. I mean, YG sounds nothing like he did, not even just 10, but like 5 years ago. The bar of quality that he delivered on has just completely gone off the rails, and he's just really not fun to listen to. It's not like entertainingly bad, and it's just boring. It's just flat out boring and uninspired. I'm going to be putting this record in the E tier. I mean, there is a cool Nas feature, but besides that, this record is really garbage. Next up, we have Billy Woods' Church, and this was a really strong record from Billy Woods. Not as good as Ethiop's, as we talked about earlier, but this was a really strong, thought-provoking, and well-thought-out record, and one that gave Billy Woods a really strong output for the year of 2022. We are going to be putting Church in the B tier for those reasons, right in between Beware of the Monkey and 10. Next up, we have Nicholas Craven and Boldy James's Fair Exchange, No Robbery, and this was a really enjoyable record. The best Boldy James project, in my opinion, of 2022, as Nicholas Craven's soulful, minimal, and drumless beats just complement the one-of-a-kind style of Boldy so well. If you like Boldy James, if you like Nicholas Craven, this is a must listen, and we're going to be throwing Fair Exchange, No Robbery, all the way up into the B tier. Next up, we have Prodigy's The Helligan Dialect 2, and this record was really disappointing. Now, first off, let's be clear. Rest in peace to the legendary Prodigy of Mobb Deep. He is one of the greatest rappers of all time, period, but this record just honestly felt like a disrespect to his legacy. It felt very rushed. It felt very botched. It did not represent what Prodigy stood for. And honestly, this was just a sad listen. I don't think this record was good. And honestly, if you like Mobb Deep, if you like Prodigy, I wouldn't listen to this because I really just think that it does a bad job at honoring his legacy. I mean, there are a couple of all right tracks, but all in all, this record is really not good. So just stay away from it. It's going to be going in the A tier. Next up, we have Kenny Mason's Roughs, and Kenny Mason had a really strong 2022, teaming up with J. Cole, Dreamville, JID, Lil Wayne. He really hit it out of the park, showing up big on some high-profile collaborations. So this record had a lot of hype going into it as it came after the Forever Story, which he had 2 features on, after the D-Day compilation. And when it comes to the quality of this record, Kenny definitely delivered a very enjoyable experience as he really put his toes into a ton of different musical territories, whether he was making more intense, glitchy rage anthems or he was making softer, more lyrical focused anthems. Kenny Mason really showcased where he is at creatively, and he shows us that he can do so many things. Now, with that said, it feels like this record almost doesn't have a real identity because Kenny is searching for a signature sound, it still feels like, but this is still a really fun and enjoyable record with just so much passion and with so much creativity in it. And for those reasons, we are going to be putting Roughs into the C tier. Next up, we have East G's I Never Felt Nothing. And yeah, I mean, you really can describe this album just from the name. You don't feel anything listening to it. It just feels like the most, processed music ever made. It's just so bland. It's so boring. Again, I don't have anything against trap inherently, but these artists have just been creating the most uninspired work possible. So, I mean, you guessed it. This record is not good, and it is going to be going at the bottom of the E tier. This record really is not redeemable at all. Lucky's Flawless Like Me was one of my favorite projects of 2022. It was a really fun record with a ton of memorable tracks. The world building on this album was so good. It really absorbed you into a whole other world with that high glitchy production. It was so nice. It was so atmospheric. And Lucky's vocals are just one of a kind. They're so smooth. They're so subtle, but they're so commanding by doing that. It's really a special magic that not many artists can duplicate. And for those reasons, we're going to be throwing Flawless Like Me all the way up in the B tier right after Forever. Next up, we have Dolce's She, Her, and this is a really special record that showcases the talent of somebody who has a lot of potential going into the future. I mean, from the melodic side, from her rapping side, Dolce has a lot of talent, and there are some cool collaborations here with SZA, with Rico Nasty. I am really excited to see how Dolce's career will fold out in the future, as I think she has a lot of potential, and that is just really well shown out here. So for those reasons, we are going to be putting this record in the C tier. Next up, we have Yeats 2 Alive, and I was not a fan of this record. It just felt like one song that would really never end, and it was a chore to listen to. It was too long. It was just way too unhinged. It was way too generic, and it just did not give me enough of what I wanted to hear from Yeat, because I felt like Up to Me was a really strong introduction to Yeat, where he could have really went off that strong and built out a really solid sound, or really defined sound, but he just didn't do it. This record was underwhelming. It just felt like one big song. We're going to be putting it into the E tier for that reason. Although, I mean, there are fun bangers, like it's just the way the album is sequenced, and it's just how long it is that hold it down. But I mean, like, the first couple of tracks were pretty strong, but as you just keep listening and keep listening, it got way too tiring. Yeat's other record in 2022 was Life, and I do think that this record was an improvement, as it was shorter, it was more concise, and because of that, I think it was a lot more of a palatable experience. While it did not really improve on anything from Yeat inherently, I do think that it is an inherently better record, and one that I am going to be putting up in the D tier. Now, Nav's Demons Protected by Angels, I think, was maybe the most underrated and surprising record of 2022. This record was actually good. Like, Nav made a good album, and after a streak of just such duds, Nav really changed it up and gave an exciting body of work to us. Nav's production on this record was really good. It was really connected, it was really cohesive, and it really embodied that spacey side of trap that made Nav special in the first place. When it comes to the features were amazing on this project, with multiple really memorable performances from Lil Uzi Vert, Future, Travis Scott, and that whole usual cast of trap artists who appear on each other's albums. This was a really enjoyable record, like actually enjoyable, not enjoyable for Nav standards. Like, this was a straight out really solid record, and one that we are going to be putting up in the C tier. The next record we are looking at is Young Nudy's EA Monster, and if you enjoy Young Nudy's music, you will enjoy this record. It is right in line with the rest of his catalog, and for those reasons, we are going to be putting EA Monster into the C tier. Next up, we have the legendary combination of Madlib, LMD, and MED's Flying High. And honestly, this record just hit under the belt for me. Madlib delivered a really solid soundscape, and one that I even think was better than No Fear of Time, but the MCs on this record just don't bring enough energy to the table to really captivate me, to really excite me. And for those reasons, I'm just going to be putting this record in the D tier. Again, like, it's an average experience. If you like Madlib, you will enjoy this record, but this is nothing to write home about. Next up, we have Flatbush Zombies frontman Meechy Darko's debut record, Gothic Luxury, and it was really nice to finally get this solo venture from Meechy Darko. And while I don't think he works as well in a solo environment than as he does with the Flatbush Zombies, this was still a really fun project to hear. It had a ton of memorable moments, like On God, which featured Freddie, Gibbs, and The Mama, which featured Black Thought. Like, there were a lot of cool moments here. It wasn't the craziest record, but if you like Meechy Darko, you will have fun with this. And he was able to hold together a solo experience way better than I expected, honestly. So for those reasons, we are going to be putting Gothic Luxury into the C tier. Next up, we have Larry June's Spaceships on the Blade, and this record is a solid record if you like Larry June, if you like that very mellow, very calming style of hip-hop. But for me, this record was just way too low energy, and it did not have enough spice, when you compare it to a record like his new 2023 record, The Great Escape with The Alchemist. So this is an okay record, but nothing I was really blown away by outside of a few moments. So I'm just going to be throwing Spaceships on the Blade in the D tier. Next up, we have a record from PG Lang's Tana Leone with Sleepy Soldier, and this is a record that has been aging really well for me. This was a really fun project that showcased the style, an innovative and fun style from a new artist who has a lot of potential. Tana Leone is a melodic rapper who takes from the likes of Travis Scott and has made his own really interesting sound. The way he's able to rap over these intense, high-paced, glitchy beats, and the way his vocals work, it's just all so interesting. And this was a really fun project. If you like melodic rap, if you like trap, you will have fun with this record. And for those reasons, I'm going to be putting Sleepy Soldier all the way up in the B tier. Next up, we have Conway the Machine and Big Ghost LTD's What Has Been Blessed Cannot Be Cursed. And this was just a solid record from Conway. It was nothing as mind-blowing as God Don't Make Mistakes, but it did not have to be. I mean, this was just a fun record, a fun experience that featured a ton of features, including a collaboration between Conway and Method Man, which was dope. But you see the usual drum work collaborators, Jay Skees, who delivers solid verses, artists like that, D Styles. It was a cool record, but nothing too mind-blowing. And for that reason, I'm just going to be putting this record at the bottom of the C tier. Next up, we have Elucid's I Told Bessie. And if you don't know Elucid, he is one half of the legendary, iconic underground duo of Arm & Hammer alongside Billy Woods. These two have made some of the most thought-provoking and well-thought-out albums of our generation. And I Told Bessie was, I think, Elucid's best solo album to this point. From the production, which is just so dark and gritty, to his performance, which just contains so much emotion. It has so much command over you while you listen. I really enjoyed this record. This was one of my favorite underground records of 2022. And for those reasons, we're going to be throwing I Told Bessie all the way up in the B tier. We're going to be putting it pretty high in between Ramona Park Broke My Heart and Heroes and Villains. Now, the next record we are looking at is Czarface's Czarmageddon. And if you like Czarface, you know what you're getting into with this record. This was a solid body of work and one that any Czarface fan will have a good time with. We're going to be throwing this project into the C tier for those reasons. Next up, we have Blxst, Before You Go. And when you look at Blxst, I feel like he kind of took the shine that Roddy Ricch had in a way, as I feel like Blxst does the whole melodic rap thing a lot better. The vibes on this record are just so great. It's a really fun record to listen to. You know, he's rapping over these vibrant, melodic trap beats, and it's just a good time. I mean, if you want some good album to listen to in the summer, to roll down your windows to get those good vibes, to just hear some smooth serenading vocals, this is an album that you should check out. And for those reasons, we're going to be putting this record all the way up into the B tier. Next up, we have Full Court Press, which is a collab album between Wiz Khalifa, Big K.R.I.T, Smoke DZA, and Girl Talk. And this record was just a lot of fun to listen to. Just hearing this trio play over these Girl Talk beats, it was a really interesting experience, and it had some cool moments. And for those reasons, we are going to be putting Full Court Press into the C tier. Next up, we have Joell Ortiz and King Crooked's The Rise and Fall of Slaughterhouse. And this record, I don't know, it was a little corny to me, to be honest. I mean, you know, this record was aimed at Joe Budden, which, you know, may be deserved, but it also came out Royce da 5'9". I mean, Royce and Joe were, you know, hopping back to talk about it, and it kind of just felt like an attempt to, you know, clap back and almost to clout chase at those two, as they are the more successful names from the group, despite how I feel about Crooked and about Joell Ortiz skill-wise. This record just kind of felt confusing. You know, the concept of the rise and fall of Slaughterhouse, I don't really think it was that there, besides with the cover, with the marketing. So all in all, this is just, you know, a confusing record, and one that I did not think was too great, but, you know, it was an all right experience. And for those reasons, I'm going to be putting the rise and fall of Slaughterhouse in the D tier. Now, we are almost done with this tier list, and the next record we are looking at is Fly Anakin's Frank. And Fly Anakin is a young MC who really excites me. He has a lot of talent. He is really making waves in the abstract scene, and this record really put him on the map to me, showing how good he can be going forward. The production on this record, it's just one of a kind. It feels gloomy and minimal, but it has this soul kick to it that just makes it feel so alive. And Fly Anakin is such a good lyricist. He's such a good writer, a songwriter. He's just a really entertaining artist to listen to. If you like abstract hip hop, this is a record you should check out. And wow, I mean, this tier list is really filling up to this point. And for all of those reasons, we are going to be putting Frank in the B tier, and we are going to be putting it pretty high up on the tier list. Next record we are looking at is Nicholas Craven's Craven N3. And this was a really enjoyable record from one of the best producers in hip-hop right now. I mean, you have Craven's minimalist, drumless loops, and you got features on this record from Stove God Cooks, Boldy James, Navy Blue, Your Old Droog, Pink Sifu, and many more. This was a dope record and one that I'm going to be putting up pretty high in the C tier. Next up, we have NBA YoungBoy and DaBaby's collab album, Better Than You. And this record's really not better than much, but it is actually kind of better than some of their other records. At least it's like kind of comedic. It's kind of charming hearing these two together. But I mean, it's not good. It's going to be going into the F tier, which means that DaBaby and NBA YoungBoy combined have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 records within the F tier. So I mean, really shows you who's running hip hop right now. The next record we are looking at is DJ Premier's Hip Hop 50 Volume 1. And with this record made to celebrate the 50th anniversary of hip hop, this was a really cool project which teamed up so many rappers across different eras of hip hop's 50-year lineage, including names like Joey Badass, Remy Ma, Rhapsody, Nas, Run the Jewels, Lil Wayne, and Slick Rick. This was just great. Hearing legends rap and have fun over DJ Premier beats. I mean, it really doesn't get better than that. Now, this is only a 5-song EP compared to an album's tier list, so I can't jolt this up into the higher tiers, but I will be putting this into the C tier as it is a really solid record and one that any hip-hop fan will have a lot of fun with. Next up, we are looking at Earthgang's Ghetto Gods. And Earthgang is a duo who always excites me. They always deliver quality experiences, and this record does just that. You got your usual chaotic Earthgang tracks, and you get some cool guests that team up with them for those moments like Future, JID, and J. Cole. But you also get some more introspective and thoughtful tracks here, which dive into such themes as mental health. So overall, this is a really well-rounded experience and one that I had a ton of fun with. And this record has actually grown on me quite some bit since I first heard it. So I'm going to be putting Ghetto Gods all the way up into the B tier. Now we are almost done with this list. We are looking at Rome Street's Kiss the Ring, and this was a really dope record. I mean, it's your usual Griselda formula, really, really well put together beats from the likes of a Conductor Williams, a Camouflage Monk. You got your usual features from Boldy James, Benny the Butcher, Conway the Machine, Westside Gunn, and Westside Gunn executive produces this thing also, which just gives it that pristine, that lavish, but gritty and muddy feel. And Rome Streets delivers a great performance here, just rapping his absolute head off. It's a really enjoyable record. If you like bars, if you like Griselda, this is a record for you. And we are going to be putting this record all the way up into the B. Nearing the end of this tier list, we are looking at Elzai's Zeitgeist, and this was a really enjoyable record from one of the most underrated and one of the most hardworking MCs in the underground. Elzai is a one-of-a-kind lyricist, and he just continues to show us why he is one of the best rappers to come from Detroit, why he is one of the best rappers in the underground, and this is a dope record. If you like Elzai, you will have fun with this record. And we are going to be putting this project in the B tier for that reason. And finally, we have Boldy James's collab with Future Wave, Mr. 1008. And everything I said about Boldy James in the previous albums he released, you can apply here. It's just not as bad as his worst, and it's not as good as his best. So, you guessed it, we are going to be putting this project into the C tier. It has grown a little bit off me since I first heard it, but hey, I mean, it's still a solid Boldy James record. And yeah, I don't know why there's another Bible on the tier list, but obviously we already ranked that. It is in the B tier. So there you have it. This is the longest video I've ever made. This is the most ambitious video I ever made, but you can see we have ranked every single record from 2022. Hey everybody, it's Future Me here, and I just realized that I left out a major album on this tier list in Joey Badass's 2000. Now, 2000 was an absolutely great record, which featured an amazing return to form from Joey Badass after a 5-year hiatus. Now, as this record was the sequel to Joey's classic debut project 1999, the expectations were high, and Joey delivered in every single way possible. From his maturity as a writer and as a person, to the more vulnerable tracks like Survivor's Guild was a tribute to Capital Steez, and a track like Wanna Be Loved, which features an amazing verse from JID. This really was a powerful sequel and one that honored every single thing that we love about Joey Badass. So for all those reasons, we are going to be putting 2000 all the way up into the A tier, right in between Learn to Swim and Vital Days. So there you have it, the full 2022 hip hop album tier list ranking. And you can see, while there are some weak albums that dropped this year, both in terms of artistic merit and also just being a lot of friggin' fun, 2022 delivered us so many great albums. Do you agree with my ranking? Let me know in the comments below, and if I left any albums out, be sure to just drop a comment. Let me know which record, and I will let you know my thoughts on that project if I have listened to it, and if I haven't, I will listen to it and still let you know. And I'll let you know what tier it will be in also, just to fully complete the list if there are any loose ends. Thank you so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed this video. Be sure to tune into the next video. Hit that subscribe button. It's free. Mr. F, Fantastic Hip Hop, signing out. Have a great day.